Good morning. My name is Tom Suter. I'm the founder of the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center, and welcome to our, and I'm really excited about this. I've seen this progress for the last 10 years, but really excited about our federal cloud migration virtual summit today. Like I said, we've been working on in this topic, I don't know, 11 years or so, and we've really come a long way as a federal government. It was in the beginning of this movement, it was like just hard to find a good use case. And now we're getting lots of good use cases, a lot of best practices. But anyway, ATARC stands for the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center. We're a nonprofit that facilitates discussion between government, industry, and academia. And I'd like to put a special thanks out to our partners at Amazon Web Services. They helped us kind of co-create this summit for you today. And they really are a good partner of ATARC. They definitely do a lot with us. A lot of our working groups, as many of you are in them, they kind of help us provide a good back end for some of the programs that we have. We've got a good partnership with them. It's been very, very healthy. So today, this morning, it should be fantastic. We've got a couple panels for you. We're going to have Q&A scattered throughout to involve you. And just as a reminder, that's one of the conditions for the CP credits. I actually think it makes for a better program. And we'll try to make this as interactive as possible. I'm going to be moderating both panels and would love to take your questions. So put your thinking caps on. And I would love to introduce our first speaker. And he's going to be our visionary keynote, Tom Santucci. And Tom is the director of the Government Office of Government-Wide Policy, OGP at GSA. And he is working with the DCOI. And the data center consolidation optimization. Sorry, I forgot what it is. DCOI, Data Center Consolidation and Optimization Initiative, and CloudSmart over at GSA. And Tom, if you want to get off mute, and there you are. How are you doing today, Mr. Santucci?
Excellent, thank you.
Great. Well, I look forward to your opening comments. Good to see you again.
Yes, pal. Thank you. And thanks to AWS for this. I just wanted to go over a few things with regards to cloud. Let me just give you my group is the Data Center and Cloud Optimization Initiative. We've got DCOI, which is M2105 in our wheelhouse, as well as M2107, the IPv6. And we cover anything policy related dealing with cloud or infrastructure, which includes many things, including networks and data centers and everything else. I was just reading an article that there's a huge data center being built in Arizona that's going to consume 1 million gallons of water every day. There's no wonder that AWS is talking about moving data centers to the cloud, or space, I should say. So I wanted to talk to you more about, when is the right time to move to the cloud and when it isn't. I don't have the answers for you, but because there isn't one size fits all, you really need to go through the process of planning and doing some strategy amongst your C-suite level. The answers will be derived from your cloud adoption strategy. To that point, the Data Center and Cloud PMOs developed a cloud strategy guide to do all facets of cloud strategy, from the current state to the exit strategy. The first thing we do is look at the current state for assessments, evaluate the people, processes, and technology to determine the agency's readiness for cloud adoption. And then the business value. We use the application rationalization process to emphasize a holistic approach to calculate the total cost of ownership and the total customer experience. It's the only way you know what is working and what it actually costs you to run that system. And then the risk framework, understanding where the risk is with regards to the mission, business, and people. We want you to look at the procurement and acquisition strategies. Many of the things that we find are people aren't buying it right or not utilizing it right. So we take you through that whole process of what are the different contract types and the payment models. And then part of the Cloud Smart is the workforce. That is a key strategy that's been the success or failure of many cloud initiatives. It starts with the strategy coordination at the C-suite level to have them fully understand what they're getting themselves into. So if things start to get a little murky, everybody's at least on the same page. You need to ensure that your existing workforce has the skills, knowledge, and ability needed to maintain or migrate to a cloud. Without that, you're going to have contractors come in and then nobody to turn it over to, and budgets get tight during administration changes for whatever reason. And then you're suddenly found you can't maintain these systems because you don't have the personnel on staff. It's one of the things I've noted of the GSA Centers of Excellence. It's a group within GSA's TTS group. It comes in and modernizes some portion of your enterprise, and they emphasize that they make sure that they bring in federal people into their team. And then as the COE disengages 6 to 18 months from the start, at least you'll have federal champions that know every aspect of that system and what they're trying to do. And then the security concerns need to be effectively managed during the cloud adoption through DevSec or some other means to detect cloud utilization and malicious activity. And then you need to incorporate CIS's TIC 3.0 strategy as well, and the new executive order. And to really understand whose responsibility is what. And then, of course, creating the target environment. That's really the end stage. That's the primary focus of adopting cloud and on-prem services, knowing what should be in the cloud and what should be on-prem and how those two will communicate. We suggest establishing SLAs for everything and holding services accountable. You're creating a new ecosystem. So if one area fails, it's going to affect a seemingly unrelated system. And then automation in the cloud could be really powerful. It's been tried on-prem, but it's been really successful in the cloud because of the tools availability. To enhance the cloud's capability through best practices like DevSec and cloud automation and monitoring tools. And on a personal note, I would have your monitoring team involved in every performance and security incident and evolve your tools to make it better over time. I ran a monitoring team, and it's amazing how much information one team could know about your entire enterprise on how well it's performing. I've always said government is really good at implementing functions, but very poor at monitoring the performance of that, whether it be overutilized or underutilized. And then the governance structure is really important to utilize the cloud agency experts and the cloud governance policy, control policies. And then the finance, which is really important and probably deficient in the government today, which focuses on common cost considerations and tagging strategy to track costs and automation. I've heard of great stories with agencies doing it, and they are reaping the benefits tremendously. And then use those same security controls to monitor how you're utilizing your cloud instances, and then train your personnel to look for under or overutilized utilization and adjust accordingly. And then, of course, the exit strategy to avoid challenges associated with vendor lock-in. The guide incorporates organizational change management, which really needs to happen. That application rationalization we'll get into a little bit later, but getting everybody literally on the same sheet of music with the same data. I'll use the 4-letter word CMDB as an example. And then we also produced a small agency version of this, since the larger 24 Act agencies will operate in a much different fashion than maybe a small agency with a dozen IT personnel. Our group, Steve Nauman, who works for me, created a application rationalization playbook. He came from SSA. He moved a huge data center in Woodlawn to Urbana, Maryland, and he was really successful. And he stressed the importance of understanding what the applications are in the data center, and not just taking the whole system or just pieces and looking at storage and servers and network, and really understanding what makes up that application and what are the interdependencies and what does it cost. If you look in terms of, you can't just look in terms of devices and license costs, because that's probably a fraction of what it costs to run that system. It's more of the multiple contractors to run that system is probably the good portion of that. So application rationalization is basically just collecting the information that you will use to understand where your money is going, how much it costs you year to year, how much technical debt do you have on the books, and how can you reduce it, and be able to look at it literally in one view. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about was zero trust and IPv6. Nobody wants to hear about IPv6, I get it, but it is important. Zero trust is a mandate that is coming down, and your plans are due in about a week and a half. But your IPv6 plans are also due at the end of the year. Those two should coincide with each other. There's no sense building a zero trust architecture built on IPv4, only to have to be forced to move to IPv6 over the next couple of years. That just adds to duplicate work, and transition would just be that much more difficult. And not to mention, your zero trust architecture should be protocol agnostic. Now, some vendors who provide zero trust applications will provide milestones to support IPv6 in their products to align with the IPv6 milestones in N2107. Agencies, ZTA implementations need to be aware of the IPv6 rollouts and support in their selected ZTA products to ensure there isn't a gap in capabilities. And make sure their agency zero trust architectures will work in an IPv6 only environment. NIST has a great environment to test out the products to make sure they work. ATARC is also talking about building a workshop to provide real life end-to-end IPv6 verification, which is really exciting to see. And, the M2107 mandate is, it's supposed to be 80% of your IP enabled assets by 2025, which is going to come really fast. Everything else seems to have dwarfed this mandate, and it's going to be difficult to get over it if you don't start now. And then finally, I just wanted to put a quick plug in for some of the GSA efforts. The shared services of GSA, login.gov and cloud.gov make cloud migrations really easy. They offload a lot of the risk into a secure. There is another group within GSA, the Unified Shared Services Division, which is implementing 4 key strategies on providing shared services. And then they also created what's called an M3 playbook on how agencies can easily migrate to those shared services. And it's a lot of upfront work as well. The more upfront work you do up, the easier the transition will be to those shared services. And I just think that we should be, as a whole, agencies, whether you're a component within a 24 Act agency or a small agency, we really should be driving shared services. There's so much redundancy in the federal government, even within agencies. And we really need to take a fiscal approach to this and start adding some common sense of why we're running so many of the same vendors within the federal government. And just to highlight, the phases include assessment, readiness, selection, engagement, migration, and operations of the shared services M3 playbook. I highly recommend you check it out. It's on the GSA website under Unified Shared Services. And that's all I had, Tom.
Well, I got a few things for you. No, this is fantastic. I'm glad you brought up the IPv6 thing. We're going to have a lot of talk today on what Steve Nauman talked about, the application rationalization, because you got to go through the list. What do I have? And I think that's so important. Like, what am I going to prioritize to go to the cloud first? And we're going to hear a lot about that today. So you're right on. I do have a question for you from the audience here. That was a good one. We got a good smart audience. We already got about 4 or 5 questions coming in. By your estimation, in the last year, what's the biggest driver behind agencies' cloud migrations? Increased cybersecurity, or enabling DevSecOps, or a little bit of a combination? What have you seen? And it's kind of funny about cybersecurity, because that was the reason you didn't go to the cloud before, and now it seems like that's the reason you go to the cloud. So we at least pivoted on that one, Tom. But what have you seen on that topic?
Well, I've seen it evolve, right? 2 years ago, the biggest driver is my boss told me to. Now people are starting to really understand some of the benefits of this. I've talked to some really smart people in the DevSecOps area that is really the driver for that, because of the automation and just the systematic approach to dealing with security and operations and getting things rolled out quickly.
Yeah. And is the Cloud Information Center, I sent out a link to everybody, and Alyssa, if you can send that out to everybody, I think that's a great resource. I can't remember, was that run out of OGP too?
No, that is run out of TTS. They run the Cloud Information Center. That's a collaborative effort that we all contribute to within GSA. That's one thing about GSA. We work amazingly hard internally to help external agencies. I'm really proud of this agency on how well we work together. No matter what your entry point into GSA, we'll eventually get you to the right resource.
Yeah, I think, sometimes everybody's got their little fiefdoms. It's great you got FedRAMP together with, the groups from ITC, and really they try to make it as collaborative as possible. It's a place to find proposals, those kinds of things that can make your life easier rather than have to reinvent everything from scratch. And lastly, I'm really excited about this IPv6 lab that we're going to bring up, and it's part of our ongoing lab series that we've done for a while now. But I think it allows government agencies, rather than stand up your own lab in every single agency, to kind of work with a nonprofit such as ourselves. So I'm really excited about that collaboration. So thank you for that. I think that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much for your time, Tom. And at least I got to see you a couple weeks ago at that IPv6 summit, but we'll look forward to seeing you in person at some point, hopefully in the near future.
No worries.
Great, thank you. All right, that was Tom Santucci. And now we're going to get our next panel on. If everybody can kind of come on here. We've got a bunch of questions. I was going to save them for the panel. There's some good ones that I can use for each of the panelists. Okay, we got a full house. Real quickly, we've got Sagar Samant, Associate Chief Information Officer, USGA. How are you doing today, Sagar?
Good. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
Great. And are you working out of your house today, or and where do you live?
Yeah, I live in Ashburn, Virginia, so I'm working out of my house. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I live in Greater Ashburn, Lansdowne, so we'll see. We could see you around the neighborhood. Who
Yeah.
knows? Good stuff. Next, we have Dr. George Duchak, who's Director of Information Operations, Chief Information Officer at Defense Logistics Agency. How are you doing today, George?
Hey, good morning, Tom. I'm working out of my basement this morning, so.
We had this a little bit. I love whiteboards. You know, if you can't really. I don't think whiteboards are ever going out of style. Probably sticky notes, and good ideas should always be on bar napkins. So I don't think as digital as we're going to get, I don't know if that's going to change anything. At least I hope not. Next, we have with us Brock Webb, technology strategist, cloud computing program for the United States Census Bureau. How are you doing today, Brock?
Doing great. Coming at you from Severna Park, Maryland.
There you go. There you go. That doesn't look like Severna Park in the background, though. I don't know, unless they built it up since the last time I was there.
Oh, good old virtual worlds.
Yeah, great to have you. And last but not least, we have with us Tyler Bursey, who's a pre-sales engineer for the partners at Amazon Web Services. How are you doing today, Tyler?
Good. Thanks for having me, Tom. And just quick thank you to all the customers and partners joining in today, listening in.
Yeah, fantastic. And what are those good? I always get, I see behind you. What are all those little guitars? That's a little set back there. What is that?
I got a whole collection. I actually have one that I didn't use for the panel that has the real guitars up there, but just some of my favorite guitars. And then you can see on the back shelves, we've got some on ML and then our decomposer keyboard, that kind of stuff. So any way we can combine music, that's always fun for me.
I love it. Fantastic. So why don't we start off with you, Sagar? Love to hear about, cloud migration. I know you're doing a lot of the business information stuff over at GSA. Love to hear how things are going and with pandemic and just generally, your cloud migration strategy.
So yeah, thank you, Tom. I guess, and by the way, Tom, I guess it was a great introduction from a Keynote perspective. You pretty much what GSA has been doing for our agencies, for our customer agencies. They're working hard inside GSA between TTS, AS, OGP, and the case is part of Federal Acquisition Services in terms of kind of putting together that playbook for cloud. But my role is I'm associate CIO for a GSA, and I'm primarily focused on Federal Acquisition Services. And that is the PBS versus FAST, TTS part of a FAST. So FAST is mostly in terms of acquisition technology. With that said, we do have a lot of systems internally in FAST in order to support that mission. So I have been with the GSA for more than 5 years. So 4 years ago or so, we put together this plan called Federal Marketplace, and it was a truly digital transformation plan. And the way I look at the digital transformation is an opportunity to re-engineer business processes. And the cloud was a means to an aid. And at that time, around the same time, Tom, people were talking about cloud first. And last 3 years, people were talking about cloud smart. And there was also a push for moving systems to the cloud. And what we looked at, instead of just taking our workload from a data center to the cloud, which is used to mean renting someone else's server, I think what we realized back then, and that's what our strategy was, the cloud is an ecosystem and represent a set of architecture and a design patterns that how we design and deliver 21st century enterprise computing solution. And it is about data platform. It is about analytics platform, like the way in the keynote, it is about analytics. It is about making smarter decisions. It's rethinking the solution in terms of components, modules, services, APIs, and data product. So in other words, cloud is not just about taking the workload off to some other place. It is about things, and things could be anything, right? API, services, automation, data, and analytics. And so that was our thinking. So on one hand, I work for FAS. They are rethinking the way they want to serve their agencies. So those come up with the business capabilities. So we wanted to think in terms of how do we reimagine process, product, and technology. And I do see that the cloud ecosystem helps you in terms of reimagining tools and technologies, but you do need reimagining process and a people. And that's what I guess one of the things that in a keynote is about the workforce. So from that perspective, I looked at this, our products as a part of a digital transformation as a business capability. And I don't want to oversimplify this one but we put together a 5-tier architecture, and I will come back to that. There is an infrastructure, there is a data, and there is a core systems, and then there is a microservices, and on top of is a user experience. So so when I look at the cloud does give you 4 out of 5 pretty much in terms. So it kind of goes across all those things, and we put together for every transformational initiative follows a unique journey, but it, as much as possible, it provides that shared services. So our infrastructure and a data and a systems and microservices become a shared services. And the idea was using the cloud enablement, which is a more of a consulting service within the part of our ecosystem, comes up with this journey, and provided that it uses those tools and technology from cloud services. And so that journey started for us more than 4 years ago. And where we are right now, most of our systems are based on, we could have used the data center. The reason we did it, it's more in terms of time to value, agility, and making sure that we deploy quickly. We reduce that lead time in terms of deploying those softwares, and remove that lag time in terms of adding new features. So we are at a point where 50% of our systems are on a cloud, leveraging a cloud ecosystem, and allows us to move things and respond to our customer requests. So that's where we are from a transformation journey. But I will sum this up to say that cloud is an ecosystem of services, is means to an end. You always have to have a business problem to solve, and make sure that that you are not just doing to move the system off of data center, because it does not necessarily, it's going to be less expensive. You got to think in terms of value that you provide, and value does not necessarily come from a reduction of a cost. Value comes from speed to the market, time to value, agility, responding to the customer request, and making sure that the last millisecond that you're going to have in terms of the customer experience, you can reduce that and improve the customer experience. And the value should be measured by that customer experience or the automation. And you're bringing down and making sure that you're taking the focusing on a high value work and automating the low value work. That's a value. Shouldn't be doing in terms of reducing the cost. It doesn't reduce the cost. It just increases the value. It increases the throughput. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Tom.
Yeah, I think we talked about it yesterday, but yeah, I don't think we're going to run out of work in the federal government, and can we do things faster? So I'm a big proponent, of course, of RPA. We have a working group dedicated to it. Yeah, I think it's one of these game changers that allow people to do interesting work. I don't think anybody's complaining they're doing the low value work. So next up, we'll go switch over to the Department of Defense and George. And I just brought up RPA. I know you have a lot of initiatives there at the DLA. I know you have some prepared comments, but if you want to add anything to that, maybe move it up the list or something.
Yeah, just as by way of intro, commercial for DLA. For a lot of your audience may not know much about us, but we're a defense agency, and we operate under a working capital fund, which means we operate like a nonprofit organization. We buy large volumes of things and get a price break, and then pass those on to our customers, who are the services and the whole of government, even foreign governments, and just put a modest operating cost on that to sustain our operations. But right now we do around 43 billion a year in business, and that would place us about number 70 on the Fortune 500 list. We deal with roughly 12,000 suppliers and award 9,000 contracts per day, contract actions per day. We have about 272 billion in active contracts, managed 5.2 million line items, and 94% of our order, billing, and inventory are automated, and 93% of all our procurements are automated. So we manage 9 supply chains in 46 states, 28 countries, and have roughly 100,000 endpoints on our network. And I think, if anything, the year 2020 has taught us that it was the year of the supply chain. We've all recognized how dependent we are on a very efficient, but maybe a very fragile supply chain to get everything from toilet paper to PPE. So that's the commercial on DLA. In terms of RPA, yeah, we've automated probably over 200,000 hours over the past 2 years at DLA, and I'm going to say roughly 130 or so bots we've developed. And probably right now, probably 90% of those bots are unattended. Initially, we started doing attended bots. We're using a little hardware module to give them credentials so they can run unattended. And getting a lot of success there. We've just started rolling out our democratization of RPA at DLA, where rather than have my office, the office of CIO, do a lot of the bot development and the bot wrangling, we're now democratizing that by creating citizen technologists that are using a lot of the same tools to develop the bots that automate the processes that they're most familiar with. And then our office, CIO's office, manages really the back end and the database connections and the data hygiene there. So we think that's going to pay a lot of returns, because now we're not putting our labor into it. Across those 9 supply chains, you got those experts that are out there. They will now start taking some control of their IT future and IT destiny in terms of RPA. So.
Great. Thank you for that, George. And next we have Brock Webb with U.S. Census. And Brock, we did have a census this last year, and boy, kind of challenging times, but you had been preparing for this for a long time. I think this census is the biggest technology change in every decade. It's, you always have new technology, but it seems like you had a lot of new technology to implement this last census. But I look forward to your comments. It's good that we get a chance to talk to you after you guys have been through the lockdown for a few years here.
Yeah, the once in a decade, census certainly is an opportunity to incorporate the technology. And just looking at the trends for some history, I mean, you look at the late 90s, that was all around big server farms. That's when internet service providers were huge. And so, yes, stand up a bunch of infrastructure, which was kind of, when you run a census, starting at the 3, you start doing tests at the 4, at the 5, at the 6, at the 7 year, and then you kind of lock into place for 8 and 9, because as soon as you hit 9, you're starting to do address canvassing, you're starting to get into the operation. So you kind of lock your technology in about 3 years early from the decennial year. So that can create some problems, because in 2007, iPhone came out 3 years before, but there wasn't enough time to incorporate the technology. In 2009, that's when Cloud First, Vivek Kundra came out with Cloud First. And again, we're going to change the technology. In fact, virtualization, although was developed in the 2000s, really hadn't hit the point where census adopted virtualization. So as soon as the 2010 census was over, it was hit the ground, get virtualization as a technology. So there was another once in a decade change, but also the advent of phones and smart devices for conducting the census was now available, things that were used. And of course, those phones were connecting to cloud processes on the back end securely to collect the data in near real time as it was being collected. So there's a lot of coolness there. The other thing is that there has been web surveys in the past. There's been pilot projects to do a web census, but this was the first time that we've invited everybody to do the web census online. And what a better time to do it. Obviously not planned, but being able to do it completely virtually and send as few people out to doors to knock and collect information was certainly an extreme benefit. So that was part of the big journey of cloud computing. Of course, after the 2010 census, big lesson learned, cloud, cloud, cloud. Everybody was saying it because cloud first had just came out. So that was started to creep into the designs. So that was built in. And of course, we were successful in doing the cloud-based web survey.
Great, great. And last but not least, we have Tyler Bursey. And Tyler, I know one of the things I remember when Teresa Carlson started, Amazon Web Service public sector. I think she had like 5 people there. One of the challenges is everybody's used to a different kind of environment, and you got to bring all these different partners. And but what are some of the trends that you've noticed in dealing with all the partners that work in the cloud space?
Yeah, for sure. And obviously our public sector business has grown a lot. I'm sure customers on this call and even some of the panelists here have seen just the amount of technical resources and sales resources we've added at AWS. Quick introduction. I work at AWS on our side of the house. So I help enable our partners really to use AWS technology and create purpose-built solutions to help their customers. So some of the things that Brock talked about, some of the things that Thomas talked about in the keynote around automation, stuff like that. How do we help customers migrate and manage their workloads in the cloud at scale is really what my role's around at AWS. Lessons learned, things I've seen over the past few years here working with public sector customers and government SI. It starts for a lot of customers when they talk about that cloud migration with the idea of cost savings, right? And obviously there's things to be had for a customer by moving to the cloud, right? We recently did a study with ID, 1,000 AWS customers, and really a 2-year journey. And these customers are customers that built a top-down enablement strategy, did application rationalization, built out a TCO for their migration. So things that Tom was talking about in the keynote. When we observed the data from those customers over that 2-year journey, we found they saved about 31% on their infrastructure costs. So there's definitely for cost savings. But when we kind of unwrap information a little bit further and dive into some of their work performance that they have, we actually saw there's even larger benefits that customers have outside of cost savings, right? And a lot of it has to do with things we're going to talk about today. Automation. How do we configure and orchestrate workload deployment at scale? How do we create guardrails instead of blockers when we talk about all business units that leverage the cloud? And really what we see is customers who move to the cloud, not only do they save on that cost piece of it, but at the time they see these huge benefits when it's a productivity boost, right? So these 1,000 customers that migrated saw a 62% increase in their staff productivity, the amount of VMs or the amount of administration of workloads that administrators on the SysOps side, on the DevOps side, increased by 6%. And then we see a lot of benefits in terms of reliability, right? Sometimes fewer downtime hours for customers when they're leveraging our cloud environment. And lastly, what I think is some of the biggest value, we talk a lot about agility, but when you start to take away some of that undifferentiated heavy lifting, that's where you start to see, IT resources no longer have to focus their time on all operating procedures or waiting for clear individual to go ahead and start adding a feature or doing an update to an application. And we actually see that customers who move to a cloud environment within that 2-year window have added 3 times as many features to their application they would have on premises, right? So, we just heard a little bit of information from Brock on US Census being able to do things online in the wake of a pandemic and bring in that census data. It's those kind of features that really excite me. Just to see once I've kind of moved away from having to manage that data center environment to moving to these purpose-built services, look at all the time my resources have to innovate rather than struggle with operating what we currently have.
Great, Tyler. And if there's anything Amazon wants to share as a takeaway, I always like facts and figures and numbers. And if you can do that, we'll be happy to deliver some of that information out to our attendees, which I'm sure will want to read it. The first question, Tom alluded to it in a keynote with Steve Nauman, app rationalization. It's almost the first step you got to go through to know what you have and what to migrate. I'd like each of the panelists to kind of dive into what was, the making of the sausage behind that process. And maybe we'll start off with you, Sagar, at GSA.
A great question. I guess we did as well app rationalization in terms of where our systems are currently sitting. And we found out that we have multi-generation systems, some of them in a Microsoft Access, mainframe, or data center, and some of them are actually we're in a cloud, more of a managed services. But what we took also a little bit different approach. We want to be driven by the business side of the house. And we looked at it and said, what's a 5-year plan for federal acquisition services in terms of reimagining their business processes? So we overlay on top of that, the app rationalization just based on the technology and the business on top of that. And what it showed us that these are the systems are all part of both. And so some of the systems which are part of a business transformation plan, we had a unique plan in terms of transforming the business from a UI or data analytics or automation, and the cloud becomes the enabler. And some of them where we strictly want to, because there were remaining pieces, either we have two things, whether we eliminate them completely. And in fact, we end up eliminating a lot of systems because it is not useful in a new world. Some of them we decided to optimize it. What that means is, so transform, optimize, and eliminate, right? The optimizement is we are capturing it as a part of a digital transformation. So that was a very, very important step to do that, kind of have a set up a blueprint or a baseline in terms of where we are, and put a transformation plan for 5 years driven by the business and a technology, technical debt, or the vision from a future. And it created a set of blueprint that we have been following, but you need to monitor it along the way, which we have been monitoring for the last few years. Back to you, Don.
Yeah, great. And George, you want to tell your story over at DLA?
Yeah, we started that app rationalization journey much the same way. I'm going to say maybe about 3 or so years ago, we started with about 1,200 apps, and we reduced that about 84% down to about 194 right now. And we're moving to a common DLA platform where there's a single sign-on, and that each user, has a certain identity for the type of function that they're doing or job that they're doing, and not only has to sign on once rather than to do a swivel chair sign on where you're sign on to one system, turn around, sign on to another, and fingering stuff from one system into the next. Believe it or not, we still do occasionally. So we started that journey several years ago, but it does begin with a business process reengineering. The same with the previous question on RPA is before you automate any process, before you re-engineer or rationalize anything, the upfront work is really not IT work. It's looking at the business processes and working with the functional communities that own those processes to say, is there a better way to do what you're doing? And then lastly, trying not to customize anything, especially in our ERP systems, staying away from trying to be unique, trying to want to adopt out of the box solutions. And if you can't, then try to use some low code, no code platform to try to enable that as well. So.
Great. We actually have a bonus question for you before I ask Brock about the rationalization. Supply chain issues. What's really, what have you seen that's going on, and how can IT help? And of course, we all care about Walmart and, buying our Xbox we're waiting on for 6 months too. But can you give us a little peek since you're dealing with it?
Oh yeah, I mean, that's like I think I said in the opening comments, 2020 was the year of the supply chain. It made us realize how much we depend on this thing that was really unseen and below the surface. Nobody really thought much about it. You went to the store, you got the products that you wanted when you needed it and as much as you needed, and never really thought twice about it until you had a perturbation to it. Well, we've leaned out our supply chain so that there's really very little inventory most of the time. Things go right from who's ever buying or building it, who's ever buying it, and sits on the shelf for a very small amount of time, if at all, because items on the shelf cost money, and you don't want to spend money on things that are just sitting on the shelf and not earning revenue for you. So the things that we're doing in supply chain are a little bit different than the private sector, where the private sector, and got AWS on their parent company, Amazon, I guess, does a marvelous job at predicting demand. They could tell you how many widgets are going to be ordered at what time of day and what season, depending on if it's Christmas or if it's the summertime or whatever. But those are kind of based on things that are predictable. Our vexing problem is trying to predict the unpredictable. When you go to war, when and if, you have to have stuff on the shelf that the warfighter needs in order to conduct their business, and trying to figure out how much and when they're going to need it is our just-in-case problem, not our just-in-time problem, and that's the part that we wrestle with daily.
Thank you for that. And we'll go to Brock on the original app rationalization question.
Rationalization, when looking at, when we first started up our cloud program in 2015, we were focused on decennial. So it wasn't necessarily a question of, app rationalization. We knew we were going to do a web survey. We knew we were going to have mobile devices. So the systems that supported those things needed to move into the cloud. And since we had a lot of our energy and focus around the decennial program, that we moved in that direction. However, looking at some of the other applications that researchers use, once we started moving things in the direction of the decennial, we conducted a successful test in the cloud in 2017. We had a technical integrator come in and produce and develop some things. We eventually shifted the decennial cloud into their space. And we were to focus on our enterprise cloud, where we were to look at what people were using across the enterprise. And there was a huge segment of researchers that were using products like SAS, SAS, not SaaS, or R, Python, machine learning, new things that people wanted to do and use for research. Well, why stand that up on-prem when you can deploy and use all those things in the cloud? So it's more just a shift of the kinds of software and things and activities people wanted to do, but we could do them better, faster, and cheaper in the cloud because we had that agility. When people were developing the platform as a service that we got for Decennial, the Pega system, they were standing up and shutting down 400 servers a day because we had that flexibility. And so that's really what we were focused on, is that agility. And as far as application rationalization, we still are shifting workloads and things to the cloud, but we're also looking at how we get rid of infrastructure. So it's not really an app rationalization, it's a get rid of our infrastructure situation now, because infrastructure means more management, more things you got to patch, control, monitor, maintain. So if we can shift into using more platform as a service and software as a service, that's where we are now in our journey. It's replacing what we used to do with infrastructure by moving to PaaS. And that's where we have opportunities to use analytics environments versus standing up a infrastructure like a virtual machine with a data science platform on it. It is going ahead and taking advantage of a pre-canned built infrastructure, analytics environment that you can use as a platform. So that's kind of what we are doing right now in our journey. Over.
Thank you. Thank you. And Tyler, what have you seen across government? If you can add something,
yeah, definitely. I think my video might have went out. It might come back on here in a second, so my apologies. But as far as app rationalization, I think we had some really good advice there, obviously from individuals who've gone through the playbook, gone through kind of looking at your applications as a whole, creating that specific TCO for your environment. I think one thing I would add in there is as you look at app rationalization, you've also got to think about the individuals as well and the processes that you have across the workforce. So really understanding how are we going to help individuals enable and grow the skills that they need to leverage this new technology, these new services once I move to the cloud, right? And so one piece there I would say is as you're going through app, think about that learning needs analysis at the same time. And on the AWS side, we offer a ton of different tools to do this. We actually have a tool through training and certification called the learning needs analysis, where you can leverage some surveys alongside different groups, different business units to really understand what do we need to learn today, where's the current skills gap, and how can we educate those individuals. I think it's no secret that having a digital transformation or a cloud migration that brings real value to the business, it's going to take the right skilled talent to do it. And so making sure that those individuals go through the correct enablement paths and understand after something gets moved back to them from a partner or from a contractor after that instantiation of the infrastructure, how to operate it and how to manage it at scale.
Great, thank you for that. So let's go to our poll questions. We've altered one on the fly here. So I think it's the first time we've ever done where you can hit multiple buttons, but what does your agency use your cloud environment for? And this is whether you're a contractor servicing a federal agency or a federal agency. And you can, I guess we could do multiple choice. And question 2, is your cloud environment hybrid or on-prem? Maybe we should have had one totally cloud, but I don't know how many are doing that. But if we can take a second to answer these, it'd be interesting. So we can, the first one again is multiple choice. And the second one is, you can't multiple choose. So let's give that just a second. And I'm really interested to see what we come up with. Alyssa, can you show the poll results? Okay. Wow. Things have changed over the years, I think. Anybody find anything about that surprising? I wish we did this 2 years ago. I bet you a lot of things have changed. It seems like, especially with COVID too, it kind of was there was a poll on the CIO Council. What was your main concern about moving to the cloud? This is like 2.5 years ago. And I think the main reason was security. And I think now it's kind of shifted. You want to go to the cloud for security. So great. Can you show that one more time? I don't know, can everybody see it? I might have clicked that off too fast. Can you show that again, Alyssa? So interesting. Any comments? It's okay if we don't have any. All right. Let's go to the next question. What lessons have we learned? What is the biggest surprises to you? Some of the biggest lessons learned is if you've gone down this journey, what are the things that kind of stick out that we can kind of let everybody else know about? How about you, Sagar?
The lesson learned is, I would say, like I said, when we started off, there was a misconception about the cost, and driving that direction from a cost to a value was an important thing. That's a lesson learned. We should never ever get into the conversation saying that cloud will reduce your cost moving forward. And the way I say this thing, the way I articulate this one is, regardless of what mission that you are doing it, at the end of the day, any agencies in a business are about improving the customer experience, and the value that you provide in terms of providing our services on time, on demand, and making sure your services are highly available, highly scalable. It's value in itself. Somebody's talked about the feature development. If you can reduce the time in terms of getting those features in the hands of the user faster than before, that's a value. And I believe the citizens expect the same kind of services from a government like they do it currently from a private. And so the cloud ecosystem level the playing field. And so that is the one. And so, and the second thing for us is what happened is, as you are in a transition between a data center and a cloud, you get two sets of bill, right? You continue to get You still have to maintain those systems in a data center during that migration. And talking about cloud economics and being transparent about your cost, it's a really important step from the day one. Explaining in terms of how it is going to reduce the total cost, TCO, I think Matt talked about. So moving it from just a cost to a TCO, talking about value, and those are the things. I think it's a less right now, but we kind of still struggle with that conversation. And then the last one, I would say that pay as you go. It is important because in the past, the data center is a capital investment. And so you get pretty much fixed cost when it comes to server administrators and other stuff. But in terms of cloud, it's pay as you go. And as you know, there's so much data out there and the data is increasing every step of the way. And it's about compute storage and network. So setting those expectations, articulating it, communicating it, and thinking in terms of total cost of ownership and value as opposed to cost. That's something I would say the lesson learned for us.
Great. And you got a little bonus question embedded from somebody. 50% of the workloads in the cloud is very impressive. I totally agree with that. How does GSA convince the remaining on-prem teams to take advantage of the benefits seen by your group's move to the cloud? How have you gotten as far as you have, and how do you go moving forward, basically, right?
Great. Like Thomas said in the beginning, we're doing a lot of hard work, and GSA has been looked at in terms of a leader in terms of technology and acquisition. And for us at GSA IT, which is me, we have been a proving ground for all those concepts. So I would say it is our partnership with our business customers, and that's very important. And that is the one so IT is not making those decisions. Let me say these things. It is about our business coming to us and saying that I want to transform the way we want to do business. I want to transform the way we want to serve our customers. And how do we get there? And the idea was the ecosystem of services help you do that. And so the 50% of the workload is just a byproduct. The North Star is about that agility in terms of leveraging the data analytics, making better decision when it comes to fleet modernization or the personal property. And these are the things that we are hearing from our customers. And so every conversation was actually not about taking the workload off. It was about the outcome, the value proposition, helping the customer. And that's why I would say that in sum up, it is not really a technology initiative. It was business and technology partnership. And that's how I would say that's how everything should be approached, not from a technology, from outside in.
Well, I like your chances of moving forward. It's like it's a government proverb. You know, I don't want to be first, I don't want to be second, but I don't want to be last. So once you reach that threshold, I think you've made it a lot easier to set yourself up for success. George, what are some of the lessons you've learned over at DLA on cloud migration?
Yeah, first of all, I like the way Sagar thinks. The coupling of IT to business is something that I think was sorely missing in the past. In fact, one of the things we've done at DLA is we don't call it digital transformation. We call it digital business transformation, just to drive home that point that IT for the sake of IT doesn't do anybody any good, but IT that solves business problems is really what it's all about. So I do like the way you think. So it's good. Some of our lessons learned were really setting expectations. You know, moving to the cloud, that's just the first step. Once you move to the cloud, now we have to refactor for all the attributes that you are enabled by, you know, moving to the cloud. So setting expectations with our users and our customers is, oh, you're in the cloud, you should be able to do, you know, this laundry list of things that, well, no, we just are really able to do what we always did in the data center, but now it's just in somebody else's data center called the cloud. And now as we refactor, we'll be able to enable new applications or new features. And that is really moving to the cloud, your first one of your early comments was, why DevSecOps was one of our big reasons to do that. We've already had 2 test cases where we stood up our software factory, and we're able to go from somebody says, wouldn't it be nice if, to a minimum viable product in under 6 months. In the past, using different software development model, that would have been at least a 3-year effort or longer. So, speed is everything. Organizing around data is the other thing, because you see this constant bearing decreasing range of the iceberg on the horizon, which is really AI. The thing that feeds AI is data, and so we have to reorganize our enterprise around making that data accessible and useful for AI. The other thing we learned are that as you migrate to the cloud, you go through a variety of mock-ups and practices, and those are usually done after hours on weekends, and typically 3-day weekends when everybody else is enjoying the summer. You're trying to move stuff, or practice moving stuff. And then when you do those practices, you uncover some other things like bandwidth bottlenecks that we're having difficulties with syncing. And I think Brock could, Tyler would probably identify with this, with the getting our snowball of data from Amazon to look at where things are progressing on our migration. So the bandwidth bottleneck was something we hadn't considered as well. So lots of lessons learned. We're always learning.
Great. Thank you for that, George. And Brock?
As far as lessons learned, I'll just go to the no duh. Most of the problems are cultural. 90% of your problems are cultural, 10% are technical. And it'll surprise you with the inventiveness to keep the status quo, to not change, to avoid moving forward into the cloud. And I think that that's a problem with any change in technology or change in a culture. Cultures that already have embraced continuous learning, continuous development and improving, that embrace agility, agile development, failing fast and moving forward. There's still change involved, but it's less. So that certainly is one of the big lessons that I think everybody needs to know, is that it's about the culture, not about the technology, and to put more effort into, I think that I heard some of my other fellow panelists here talk about developing those good relationships with customers. IT used to be a monopoly and got into this mode of dictating to people what they were going to consume. And then came along cloud, and I'm almost thinking of, I'll make a movie reference to Pirates of the Caribbean, where Johnny Depp as Captain Jack said, "What does the ship represent?" And he looked out there to the ocean and he said, "Freedom." And to me, that's what the cloud is really representing to a lot of people, freedom from the monopoly of IT in some ways. But from an IT perspective, we've offloaded email. We now use Outlook online, Office 365. We use a content distribution network. We're keep on pushing out some of the things that we don't need to deal with. Now we're free of those things, and we can provide much better service. But from a customer standpoint, I think that there's freedom to choose all these new things. And I think that the mind shift in being an IT service provider is you have to think more like an entrepreneur. You have to think, okay, what are customers willing to pay for? Because with cloud, that was a big culture shock. Okay, I got to budget and pay, monthly bills. Oh no, how do I do that? Well, having to work with your customers and build that trust and that partnership so that they know that when we're monitoring their service and their cost and their spend to help them with that when we approach them with ways that they can save money and do better things with cloud, that they'll work with us. That we need to start with the customer and talk about what their needs are so that we can then work backwards to the technology. As Steve Jobs said, start with the customer experience first and work backwards to the technology. Again, those are just repeat lessons that we need to keep reminding ourselves because we tend to learn them over and over again.
Yeah, and I'm going to let everybody else talk. That was my next question, Brock, was around culture. And I remember I had a few companies, but the first one that I started, I think it was like 2008. My IT guy, he really ran the company for a while there. You have to erase your emails. You have to do this and do that. And I looked and I outsourced my email. was like the best thing I ever did, you know, to a company that was outsourcing email at the time. And it was basically pre-cloud. And it was the best thing. But I think that those days have definitely changed. So we'll get back on the culture thing with everybody else. And we'll go with Tyler. And you know, to get your insights on what you've seen, you know, working with cross partners across government. And then I have a bonus question for you.
Yeah, definitely. So from a culture perspective, and I think Tom hit it really well in the keynote on how you have to think about it top down in terms of that alignment. I mean, in terms of what I've seen with customers, a lot of what we work at on the AWS side is how do we make sure a customer can build a cloud enablement engine, right? At AWS, we have this concept called a cloud center of excellence, which is really, it's all about putting leaders from really across the organization. So you get all of those different perspectives and bringing them into the same group. And you treat something like cloud skills enablement or the orchestration of our workloads, a lot of the things we talked about today, as products. And you create a plan of how you're going to take that product, how you're going to build it, how you're going to market it to your citizens, how you're going to market it to different employees if it's something like training, and how you're going to help kind of shift that culture towards everything we do is a buy-in on a cloud first movement. And we want to make sure that everything that touches this center of excellence is always thinking about what's the next way we can innovate, what's the next way we can add a feature to that product. And really it starts with that learning needs analysis that I talked about earlier. And once you have that formal plan in place, that's when it's super important to reinforce all of that formal training that's happening across IT, across different business units, to kind of adopt that with events or workshops that have something specific to the application itself or something day-to-day you would do in AWS as an employee. And I think like we have so many different ways of doing that, but one that I've seen really successful that our partners do as well as our training team does are AWS immersion days. So there's so many different tools that I could use to migrate a workload. There's so many different ways I could get my data and ship it up to the AWS cloud, right? George talked a little bit about using Snowball to bring his data to the cloud, right? I could use a site-to-site gateway. I could use a snowmobile. In AWS immersion days, I get to leverage those products really in a safe environment where users can test how that's going to fit with their specific application, leveraging our resources like myself and other technical resources to really understand what's the best fit for this in my environment. Is it a fit? Is it something I should look at adding in the future? And I get to play with it and see how quickly I can create a minimum viable product leveraging that service. I think that's a really great way for individuals that are curious about the newer technology or building something within their environment or a cloud center of excellence that's evaluating a new solution to really understand what it's going to look like for them.
Yep. Thank you, Tyler. And I got a bonus one from you asked by government individual. I don't attribute anybody unless they say it's okay. What knowledge is needed in different roles such as contracting officers and specialists, the ISSO and ISSM, and most importantly, the mission office to move cloud computing? And that was directed at you.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think obviously there's a baseline knowledge around how cloud is going to interact with your systems. When we talk about contracting, it's understanding how can I procure cloud services in a way that makes sense, right? Normal procurement practice is a little bit archaic in the sense that we want to build things at flat rate, or the way we build out how we're going to purchase things by a SKU list or something like that. So I think there is some education on the procurement side, just to the OpEx model of consumption, and being able to analyze and budget what you're doing on a monthly basis rather than looking at things annual or in longer contract terms, I think is essential. The other piece, especially for really every part of an organization, is after you've done app rationalization, you understand what would be a good fit for cloud. You understand what you're going to rehost, what you're going to replatform, what you're going to refactor. The entire organization should go through some sort of TCO analysis or really training on something less like our cloud practitioner, where you understand all those different services and then look at what that TCO analysis looks like. Look at what your application dependency looks like for your environment.
Great, thank you for that. And let's focus on culture, and I kind of throw in the training on the culture side. I just remember in the early days of cloud, somebody was migrating, and the folks in data center said, "What happens to my job? We're going to bring the cool kids. They're going to go and migrate us to cloud." That's all they cared about. So I think some of that's culture and training built in. Sagar, do you want to touch base on that and what you've seen successful?
Yeah, it's a great thing. I think Brock mentioned this before, that about the business taking more lead and cloud level the playing field. So to that end, and I want to also another concept that Josh talked about, software factory. So when we started this one 4 years ago, I started this thing saying that reframe, reskill, and retool. And the reframing is the whole paradigm shift, the way we develop and deploy software and the way we work with our business through the agile methodology. So that was a reframing of the message. And the concept was a software factory. What that means is the tools in the factory, that's your pipeline, assembly, DevSecOps. The technologies are services that goes inside the application. That's like building a car. You are still creating a unique product based on the software factory, which is the pipeline. And in order to build those cars or a product, you got to work with your business. Good, that's a transformational piece. But the missing part was, somebody talked about the culture and the people and a training. That means you got to retrain the people. So that is the reskill part, right? The retool was the factory. The reframe was the messaging. And the retool was the reskill was the people. To that end, we did two approach. First thing is we got our people and say that the line between business and technologies are blurred. What that means is we're going to be more like a business relationship manager and less of a technology, and work in a world where we are communicating, being transparent about what we do. And we got them to do, I put together a curriculum actually, and got people to train and put together roles such as cloud engineers, DevOps engineer, site reliability engineers, agile, scrum master. Those are the new roles from the traditional role of a server administrator, database administrator. Those are gone. We got a new roles. That's a reskilling part. The second part, I would say that changing the acquisition strategy. We put together a new BPA with the Comet, where we got to set up contractors who actually go to the core challenge to make sure every one of them know how to build software on a cloud. And that was 2.5 years ago. And what I do currently right now, in order to continue to train, instead of vendors telling me how to do the job, actually I do a tech exchange every 4 weeks. And we talk about the stuff that we have been working on. In other words, instead of vendors or partners influencing us, I want to make sure that they use tools and technology that's been reviewed by my team. And the last part, I would say that I have a cloud enablement team that gets involved in the initial part of every project and continue to monitor architecture runway and making sure we stay on architecture. So that's a reskilling and a training part and change of culture. It takes time. It's very organic in nature.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It isn't easy. You've got to work on it all the time. So that was fantastic advice. How about you, George?
Yeah, was it Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? We've all heard that. And I think the hardest part of any IT job are the soft skills, not the hard skills. And that the whole thing about change management, the whole part about the frozen middle, you find that a lot of the folks at the lower end, just coming out of college, want to embrace new technology. The leaders in the corporation understand the value that the technology can bring to the business, but it's the folks that are in the middle, those middle managers, they're kind of stuck doing their current day-to-day job and responsible for a certain set of performance metrics. And anytime you want to perturb or change those, that's where they, kind of hunker down and don't want to change anything because what's working is work for them. They're, habitually wedded to a particular way of getting things done, and it's really tough to change those. And the reason I think in a lot of organizations it is difficult to change is because the risk-reward paradigm is fixed. If they take risk and fail, then they get into trouble rather than taking risk and, well, it was called an experiment and it didn't work out, but try something different. So the other thing is, and was talked about about earlier was just the reskilling part. I think the half-life of information now is just getting vanishingly short. You used to be able to come into a job and you could do the same job for 20, 30 years without really taking much retraining. Today, I think I heard something, read something that said half of what you learn in college is out of date by the time you get out of college. So now apply that to the workforce, that we have to develop a culture of continuous or constant learning, not just episodic learning. So
I did learn how to have a good time in college. I don't think that's gone out of style yet. But on the technical side, I agree with you. Brock, I know you talked a little bit about it. Anything else you want to add?
I'll throw a little bit into the workforce area. That was a big challenge. We're coming in with cloud, people that were used to being in the data center, and then, oh my goodness, this cloud, yeah, how is that going to impact me? We had some folks that really just embraced it, and they did the training on their own. They were hungry, they wanted to do it. I think that in a lot of the IT field, you get a lot of people like that are just willing to just grow into those things. And the person I'm thinking of is pretty close to retirement. It's not like he's a young person just out of college. So you see a lot of that, of people that are just really hungry to grow and learn. You see people in other parts of the organization that want to come into cloud. They see the future and they can see a career path with getting certification and training, and they can see a future in cloud and they want to come into that. And that's some of the things that we're looking at. How can we create those opportunities or make that happen to increase the amount of talent that we have at Census? Because you have this stock, this pool of talent, and some's going to go away, some's going to come in, but you have to continuously grow it. And the team that you have today isn't going to be the team that you need in 4 years, as was alluded to. The technology is going to change. So you don't want a static fixed team of people. You need to have this kind of revolving door of people that can come in with new skill sets, new ideas, and perspectives.
Great, great. And Tyler, you're going to get the last word on this panel. No pressure or anything.
Awesome, that's great. And my video is back, which is perfect. No, I think we've had some really good input, and obviously seeing it in real practice from GSA, from Census, from all of these different divisions of the government. And I see the same things working with our partners and their customers as we go through enablement exercises. It's really interesting to me because I talked a little bit about how you have to have like that top-down strategy. You have to have that formalized goal. Each different division is going to go through this specific training. Here's the goal, here's the outcome. And when we pushed forward that model, we always take feedback from customers. I think it's AWS, like 90% of our services actually just come directly from customer feedback. The same can be said around training and enablement. What type of programs do we create? How do we enable people faster? And so in some of the feedback we got initially, it was, I worry that by training and upscaling all this talent I have and continuing to teach them new ways to do things in the cloud or new programming languages in this formal training plan, I'm going to worry about retention. And so we did some studies with customers that are implementing those formal training plans. And what was really interesting is we found that customers that have a top-down approach and employees have easy access to formalized training about a specific cloud service or workload are 30% more likely to stay at the company that trained them. So these employees want that training. They want a top-down formal plan, and they want to be able to use those new skills that they acquire at the organization that trains them. And then at the end of the day, those same customers that provided that plan are accelerating that cloud adoption by 80%. So we're seeing a huge gain from customers who really build that model from the top down. And I think you can hear from these panelists here have built that same type of cloud enablement engine, reviewing that training as a product and making sure that individuals have access to it.
Tyler, you really hit on something I call, it's like the paradox of opportunity. The more opportunities you give people, and I've noticed this in my career, you get them all the training they want, and they can actually be better prepared to go somewhere else. They don't want to. They don't want to go to another organization because they're getting so much juice out of the organization that you're in. So the more you train them, you know what, if they leave, now they know if they do leave, which is not against the law, now everybody knows you're the farm team. This is where I can really advance my career. So I think you brought up a good point. So that's all the time we had today. We could go on. This has been a fantastic panel. Thank you, Sagar, George, Brock, and Tyler. This has been fantastic. Thank you very much. And before we go on to the next panel, I did get a question that is very pertinent. And it's really in regards to, are there tools out there to better analyze cloud computing solutions in the marketplace to determine best fit? If so, are these government provided or for fee for the private sector, or only those proprietary tools used by research firms? And we had another question about our Ipv6 lab. One of the things that I've tried to do at ATARC, I kind of come from like an operational background, and it's great we're doing webinars, they're very informative. We're doing working groups. I kind of like to touch the technology. So we started this concept, it's a lab concept at ATARC, and we started it in the TIC 3.0. And it was like very kind of timely too, because we had pandemic. We started it before pandemic, and then everybody's going to pandemic. But what we did was working with partners, we set up an environment, and we weren't picking winners or losers in technology, but we were demonstrating what CISA came out with TIC 3.0 technology and their different use cases. So all these companies had the benefit of trying to showcase their solutions and how they met the mandate. So we got about 15 companies to do private kind of demonstrations, government only. And we really like that lab concept. So we have one in Zero Trust now. We're talking about doing one in IPv6, which we're moving forward. We got one in AI and data analytics. And we're talking to government agencies. We're talking, and I'm not going to disclose because we haven't worked everything out, of maybe having a test bed to determine where these applications, how they operate in different environments. Because what we're finding out is sometimes you buy some software and then you try it in your environment of choice, and you have a lot of unintended costs you didn't understand, and it adds a lot to the cost. So this lab concept, the reason I'm bringing it up is if you have any ideas or any agencies, I think the premise is that each agency shouldn't set up a lab to do testing for procurement. If there's some way we can pool our resources, Tom mentioned about shared services. This is kind of a shared services using a nonprofit. So we're really excited about that. And it's just kind of springing up, labs are springing up organically. We're talking about 5G. And we have a virtual environment. We're working with a partner, Acuity Systems, where they actually developed this originally for the GSA and the CDO, where they have a test and dev environment where you can try different software in different environments, using all the latest containers and actually analyze performance to a degree. So we're really excited about this lab concept, and we'll send some information out about it. But if you have an idea, hey, your agency wants to be a guinea pig, hey, we're all for it, as long as we have good government input. And the great thing is we managed to make this no cost to the government. So they get a lot of benefit out of it. Once again, ATARC's not picking sides. We're not there to analyze. You've got to make your own business decision. And maybe you're using it for marketing research. You're finding out, hey, here are the players in the space. They claim to meet the mandate. They kind of showed us in an actual environment. And hey, now I want to take it to the next level. ATARC has nothing to do with that. That's going to be between the vendor and the agency. So good stuff. Next I want to bring our next panel on, and we are going to talk about cloud storage in this panel. So if Jamie, Shelley, and Brian can come on, and we'll get things rolling. Okay, there we are. We've got everybody. We've got everybody. So we'll start off with you, Jamie. How are you doing today? I think that is your home office.
It is. I'm very well. It's nice to see you again, Tom.
Yep, and it looks very rustic. Is this your house?
It is my house, yeah.
I like it.
I
picture you in Montana or something.
Yep, just Maryland.
Great. And we also have Shelley Nussel. Am I saying that right, Shelley?
It's usually Nessel, but
Nessel, we'll call
it depends on which parts of Switzerland you're from.
Oh, wow. Great. Yeah, I had seen that in Journalism Rule 101. I worked at the paper at the college. You're supposed to get people's pronunciation, so I apologize for that. And
that's fine.
Where are you out of today, Shelley?
I am out of my home office, which I also share with my husband and daughter, who are also federal employees.
Wow. Well, thank you all for your service.
Yeah.
It runs in the family. I love it. And last but not least, we have Brian Schofel. I'm having a bad day on pronunciation. How do you pronounce your
It's
last
all
name?
right. It's Chef Lee.
Chef Lee. Okay, great. How are you doing today? And where are you out of?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I live in Scottsdale, Arizona. And thanks so much for having me and giving me a reason to put on a shirt with a collar for the first time in I'm not sure how long.
Yeah, well, you know, with Amazon folks, it's like kind of hard to get the jacket than the tie. I don't know. That's okay though. I like the casual look. I only wear this jacket. I think the only time I've worn a jacket has been on these webinars. So I'm with you. We definitely have learned a lot from everything. So maybe we can start off with you, Shelley, kind of a little bit about your agency. You guys got a fascinating mission. Talk about that a little bit. And then, you know, what do you guys, were you on disaster recovery in your agency?
Well, I work for the Maritime Administration, which is part of the Department of Transportation. And our mission is to, number one, provide support for commercial shipping, but we also provide support services to the Navy and Coast Guard for emergency and basically surge support in terms of ships. We have a fleet of approximately 50 ships that we manage for those kinds of situations. And we also run the United States Merchant Marine Academy up in Kings Point, New York. And we also do oversight for the other state maritime academies. We have a good story to tell, I think, in terms of DR in general. MARAD has basically been fully redundant. That's a good way of putting it. Basically, for the last approximately 7 years, we basically have a situation for our headquarters that basically we have duplicate, we have the ability to basically roll over using real-time backups to our recovery site. And we basically have done that for annual assessments or annual testing for the last 7 years with no real downtime, basically no one knowing that we did it at headquarters and our field offices. Our newest challenge is that one of the things that we're doing is we're building 6 new school ships. These are actually national security multi-mission vessels, which means besides being training vessels for the different school, state maritime schools, they will also can be put into mission in support for emergencies, like to support the USS Comfort or the Mercy, and any kind of expeditionary force that we would do to support the Navy or the Coast Guard. So basically we have soon to be 5 floating network systems, usually 3 systems per ship, that have to be with different classifications and different recovery times that are, you know, at any point in time going to be 1,000 miles away from, or thousands of miles away from a backup server. So we are looking into expanding the cloud initiatives we have for recovery into actually being cloud over satellite to basically do our recovery.
Yeah, and just maybe a little bit about how hard it is to have systems when you're in the middle of nowhere. You know, it's a different kind of challenge. If you could talk a little bit about that compared to, you know, land-based types of systems. So recovery obviously is big, but it's a challenge for all your systems.
It is,
yeah,
and it will be interesting because like I say, we have multiple networks on each ship, and we have what would be referred to as, you know, mission critical systems like navigation, ballast control, HVAC, that actually have redundancy on the ship. And we actually have multiple we have a recovery site in a appropriately different location on the ship. But then we have what would be we refer to as the business network, which is personnel, if these are being used as training ships, some of our communication systems that may have some redundancy on the ship, but may not. It may be a much more short-term ability to recover. And then we have what we call the morale network, which is email and browsing and all of those things that are being offered to, whether it's the students on the ship, the personnel on the ship, that it hasn't really been defined as, the recovery requirements for that kind of a system. But it's having to manage those kind of different recovery time periods, business requirements, the impact that it has on 3 different networks, like you said, at any point in time that can be far away from and many different time zones away from your normal recovery process is going to be a challenge. And we've had to do it for 1 or 2 systems on our current ready reserve fleet, but now we're going to have to do it for every system on those ships.
Yeah, that's the first time I've heard an email system referred to as my morale system. Wow, yeah, I hadn't thought of that. It's morale to me too, just maybe bad morale. Great, thank you for that. It was very insightful. Jamie, love to hear about what.
All right.
We talked a lot on cloud, but I'd love to hear about how you guys are handling your disaster recovery.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot in common with our cloud strategy, and disaster recovery is certainly a part of that. So I'm Jamie Noble, and I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for OJP. That's the Office of Justice Programs. And the mission for OJP, for those of you that may not be familiar, is that OJP is really the grant-making arm of the Department of Justice. And so our main mission is to improve public safety and improve the fair administration of justice across the United States by supporting law enforcement and communities across America through funding made possible by the federal government. And right now, OJP is in the middle of a really big digital transformation where we're modernizing our grant management system. And we went live last October. This system is a brand new concept really for OJP, in that it's a complex system of systems that's distributed in the cloud. And we already at OJP had a lot of systems in the cloud, which really helped us have a very cost-effective disaster recovery program. And then, through our experiences over the last several years, really over the last 10 years in migrating to the cloud, that really positioned us very well in terms of being able to make a decision about where we wanted to host our new grants management system. It was a no-brainer for us. We knew we wanted to host it in the cloud. And one of the major, business decisions driving that, not only from a business perspective, business continuity, but also from an IT perspective, was the disaster recovery component of that. One thing that we've experienced and have really good data on over the last couple of years is having our systems up. If you have one system, that's down and it's a software service, or it's on infrastructure that we are managing ourselves in the cloud and not in an on-prem computer room or data center, it's a lot easier for us to hold our vendors accountable and for them to help us through our disaster recovery, because they have a lot more resources just by the nature of their business than we do in our on-prem computer rooms or even the larger DOJ hosted data centers. So, just given our experiences with a host of other applications, this really was a major factor in our decision-making process for Just Grants.
Great. Thank you, Jamie. And Brian, my experience in disaster recovery goes back a while. I remember I was sometimes had to be the person that takes the tapes that are backing up our system and taking them home. And then invariably something bad would happen. Somebody would try to recover from the tapes and half the stuff would be lost. How is the federal government, in your perspective, using cloud now? And what's the kind of acceleration curve in your experience? I'd love to hear a little bit of, of course, introduce yourself, but I'd love to hear some of that kind of data if you have it.
Sure. Well, the curve has really been a hockey stick over the past several years. We've seen, dozens of federal agencies adopt the cloud at scale and get tremendous benefit from it. It's great to hear from our customers sharing their experience with that today. But, good disaster recovery, I think, really begins with good disaster preparedness. And so, the organizations that we've worked with that have really seen tremendous success with the AWS cloud have started, with really strong planning. The nature of the cloud, the scalable, secure nature of the AWS cloud means that customers can recover much faster in a cloud environment than they would typically be able to in an on-premises environment. We've had partners like Raytheon who work with many of our defense contractor or defense agency customers tell us that they've been able to stand up compliant environments in a matter of 15 minutes when it used to take them, months, and those environments would rarely be updated. And as you mentioned, with tapes and this legacy technology, it's very difficult to verify that these backups have been completed, that the data it has strong integrity throughout, has not become corrupted, and is a recoverable copy of that data. Versus, some of the things that we've already heard from Jamie or from Shelley about, incremental backups and reducing the amount of data that would get lost in the event that a restore needs to happen, which we call a recovery point objective. So if you have a recovery point objective of 1 hour, that means you can tolerate the loss of 1 hour's worth of data. For public sector organizations, I don't think there really is much room for service disruption, whether we're talking the defense level or the federal civilian level. So when these customers are faced with like natural disaster, emergency, or even cyber attacks, which I think we're probably going to cover as well, we want these organizations to be able to continue running mission critical applications to power the really essential platforms that we all rely on, like call centers and patient and judicial databases, online learning sites. Like, we cannot live without these things. So it's great to hear that our customers are using a strong cloud-based DR strategy, because it's really necessary for public sector organizations that want to be there to serve their constituents.
Great. Well, my first question, and please ask questions. We're going to do some polls here in a minute that I'm really looking forward to seeing the results. But, Shelley, where do you get started? How do you plan for disaster recovery? And, how does this disaster recovery affect your cloud environment? You're on mute, Shelley.
I didn't want to sneeze over anyone else.
Okay. Well, don't worry about it. I was on mute for 3 minutes during one of my first webinars, and I was like wondering why nobody was saying anything. So
yeah,
don't worry about it.
Merit has a depth of expertise in doing on-site prem recovery. Basically, we operate a data center in Mississippi, which, as you may guess, occasionally gets taken down for any particular reason. And so we basically right now for our prem system, our on-premises system applications, we basically go through, we have really good, like was mentioned earlier, we have really good process. And when we have had the advantage of like the last 7 years of basically doing real-time data redundancy at our backup site. And identifying those systems that we have that are most critical to get back up. We also our recovery is built around also being able to bring up department-wide systems like email. Many of those systems that are very critical to actually doing our mission and our business that have moved to being cloud-based, like you say, email, a lot of our procurement. For our agency, the joke has been in the past that the most critical application we have at MARAD is our ability to use our purchase cards in an emergency. Because we need to be able to buy parts, procure contractor support, whatever that might be. As we have had the opportunity, we have been moving our actual recovery sites to the cloud. The United States Merchant Marine Academy, we are an AWS customer, and we have basically moved our recovery there, partly because they didn't have a good, their previous solution was very expensive in the fact that they had a number of systems, including their LAN, their education systems, and some of their medical systems that were, had very low recovery times, and so we had very expensive solutions. Moving that into the cloud, it has been a real real eye opener for a lot of people that, as you say, were dragging their feet a little bit on moving stuff to the cloud. It happened very, it worked very well. It went very easily. We had the ability to do basically a rollover due to some flooding and some other issues that they've had up at the academy, with basically it being invisible in general to the normal users. We've had some power issues up on Long Island that the rollover was very, very easy and very, very simple, to the point that the academy is now looking to move all of their systems to cloud platforms. We're going to basically start with our two major applications up there, which is student information system and an item called Campus Labs, which basically does all those non-educational things for a campus. And basically they are moving those into platform for service and system for service applications. They haven't decided exactly where yet, but they are both going to be cloud solutions in the next, this is to be basically complete within the next year.
Great. Thank you for that. Great detail. Jamie?
Yeah, so I think that, one of the main things is that we work really closely with our vendors. That's the thing that we have to do since we're so distributed in cloud. And one of our main strategies is not only to move our infrastructure that we manage to the cloud to services like AWS and Azure, so that we could be more distributed, but it was also very deliberate for us to leverage software as a service. And so, being distributed that way has called for us to have very close working relationships with our vendors. We have sponsored a lot of as a service cloud service providers through the FedRAMP authorization process, which has had a lot of benefits. So a lot of agencies maybe don't like to do that, don't like to go through that process. But one of the benefits for us has been that when we sponsor cloud service providers through that process, it's positioned us to be able to work with them on their functional disaster recovery exercises. And a lot of them, even though they might have additional customers, and a lot of them do, OJP is not their only customer, allows us to work with them and work very closely with them and be the guinea pig, if you will, on performing those exercises. So it really gives us kind of that bird's eye view of what works, what doesn't work for us. And we've been able to advise and work with other agencies that are leveraging those cloud service providers, and give them some advice on things, that what didn't work well, what does work well, and that kind of thing. So that actually has been very eye-opening for us at OJP, and has allowed us to have a much better working relationship with our vendors.
Great, and we have a bonus question for you that just kind of popped up. And are there, part two of this question, let's just address that. Are there best practices that DOJ uses to manage costs for, disaster recovery? And that probably goes with cloud generally, but let's focus on disaster.
Yeah, for sure. I wouldn't say there's best practices other than being more distributed in the cloud. I think it's definitely cheaper. So, I mean, it can be up to 80% cheaper to leverage cloud for disaster recovery versus being on-prem. If you have your own data center, and you not only have to worry about backing up your systems and having a disaster recovery site, but there's then also the cost associated with whatever that disaster is. If it is a real disaster, it could be a natural disaster happening in Mississippi, like Shelley mentioned. Those are very expensive to clean up. You have all that water damage. If it's a hurricane or flooding or anything like that, you could have electrical and wind damage. So there's not, and it could, prevent you from even moving back into that site. So, you have that whole host of problems to deal with, in addition to, making sure that your business can continue as normal in accordance with stakeholder expectations. And for us, a lot of those stakeholders are law enforcement and victims of crime that need those dollars to be delivered so that they can deliver those services.
Great, thank you for that, Jamie. And Brian, I think when we're talking about plans for disaster recovery, I think you probably peeked at a few as they're talking to you, and you've had some exposure to them. What do you see across government on some commonalities?
So, no, Jamie absolutely hit the nail on the head in terms of, the backing up to cloud or using cloud as a disaster recovery platform represents tremendous cost savings to AWS customers of all types. You don't have idle infrastructure, you're not paying for duplicate software licenses, all these great savings. And where we've seen real success from customers, both in the private sector and in the public sector, is that they take those savings and they reinvest them back into the organization to modernize application architecture, to become more secure, and just continue to iterate, have a continuous process of improvement, not just on the technology and the applications, but on the processes as well. So the best practices really that I have seen, like from customers that do this really well, is they are regularly revisiting what their business continuity objectives are. They really have a deep understanding of what problems they're trying to solve by moving workloads to AWS. They're really looking at what workloads are mission critical. Obviously, in the public sector, we know they're doing that. Which workloads would have a lower impact or higher impact on business if they became unavailable for a longer period of time, and what are the specific aspects of an application that require specific levels of availability, because some applications are a little bit more monolithic or distributed than others. Going forward, the customers that do disaster recovery, disaster resilience on AWS really well are housing workloads across multiple availability zones in our AWS GovCloud regions, which of course are authorized for FedRAMP High and meet DoD impact levels 4 and 5. They will support region routing using our Route 53 service between GovCloud East and GovCloud West. But as somebody on the previous panel mentioned, so much of this comes down to people and processes. And so customers that do disaster resilience really well have established an incident management process and are regularly revisiting what team roles and responsibilities are, clarifying the order of operations for incident owners, documenting that procedure, and just asking some basic pencil and paper questions, such as if you didn't have access to your laptop, what would you be able to do? If you didn't have access to your email, what would you be able to do? How would you even become notified that a disaster had occurred? And then of course, there's the practical matter of backing up your data and really understanding that the cloud and AWS is a resilience tool, but not a resilience solution. And people always have to be involved. And as I'm very fond of saying, there is really no software substitute for good judgment. Not yet. We're probably working on that, but we haven't got there yet.
Great stuff, Brian. I actually have a question for you too. You kind of touched on it a little bit, but I think it's like kind of the rationalization of what you should do on storage. But does AWS have tools or dashboards for provisioning and optimizing storage with automation frameworks? For example, a tool to possibly move from flash-based storage to platter based storage on an automated way when lower latency is acceptable. So I guess it's kind of like different costs, you can live with, and different performance.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so certainly within Amazon S3, our object storage system, several years ago, we introduced a concept called intelligent tiering that helps customers save money by moving data from frequently accessed tiers to lower frequently accessed tiers for a lower price per gigabyte per month. The particular service or feature that you're talking about would be a movement of block storage between different service levels in our Elastic Block service or Amazon EBS. Customers can use services like Trusted Advisor and other things to understand where their costs are coming from, what certain services are driving certain usage, and the platform will make recommendations based off of the performance of your workloads and what you actually need.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Let's, Alyssa, can we go to the polls? We kind of altered one. I didn't want to ask, but okay. Okay, what do we got? How confident are you in your agency's disaster recovery plan? And this applies to contractors if you are servicing a government agency. So let's see what we can do here. All right. Alyssa, can we share the results? I assume everybody here is quick on the trigger, had their coffee. Okay, we got an honest crew here. So I'm glad we're having this panel, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Until we get that to 100%, I think we still got some work to do. Any surprises there? Or I guess it's going to go into my next question, but let's do the next poll. Can we show that, Alyssa? This goes into my next question as well. I think this might lead to higher confidence, but this will be our next question. Okay, let's see what we had. See if these two questions kind of connect. Okay.
Yeah. Along with this question, along with the last question, I think a lot of it comes down to what kind of disaster are we talking about? Also, a failure of a certain component, a power outage, storm, these sorts of things happen. And we can usually recover the underlying infrastructure relatively quickly, particularly if we're using cloud. But yeah, I'm wondering if folks on the line also have simulated or tested a disaster recovery event in the event of something like a cyber attack like ransomware.
Well, I'm a little biased because I worked at UCF, the Institute for Simulation and Training. So let's talk a little bit about how do you prepare for this? What kind of wargaming scenarios? Like Brian's point, it could be it's something as serious as ransomware or something that is a known. You might have power outages in Mississippi, for instance. I remember working at Keesler. There's always power outages and stuff like that. So, Shelley, how do you prepare? And I think that's like in any sports team or any kind of team, you got to practice this stuff, right?
Yeah, you have to practice, and you have to, as you say, you have to prepare for the known knowns. If you are going to have a data center in Mississippi, you have to assume that there's going to at least be the possibility of Well, loss of personnel. That's the best way I could describe it. Our issue is frequently we're in a NASA site. Okay. So we're talking serious bunker mentality. So from that point of view, the servers are not going to go down. The power's not going to go down. Connectivity might go down, but we may have the difficulty of people getting to the facility. So you have to prepare for, remote uses. So you have to be prepared for the known unknowns, or the known knowns. You have to have and I do not have what I would consider to be a best practice, but you have to also make some planning for, I won't call it the known knowns, but the things that could happen, and the frequency or the likelihood and the impact that that's going to have on your operations. A lot of people might consider, and I've heard this mentioned frequently for us, is that the last year in one way has been a 18-month-old incident, in the fact that we went from approximately 10% of our people attaching remotely to do their work to about 90% of our people attaching remotely to do work. Work on sensitive systems, moderate systems, finance personnel, and how that was ramped up. And DOT in general has been very successful at that. So that was a very well handled, it was something that was built into the systems, and the ability to be able to ramp that up very quickly worked out very well. We did do and it ended up just being a tabletop because of some, department-wide changes, but we did run a tabletop of a ransomware scenario, in terms of making sure that because we have a department-wide incident response and security operations center for DOT. We basically ran to make sure that the right people were involved, that the types of communication between, whether it's legal, whether it's HR, whether it's IT, that all those communications, and between all the different agencies, all 13 different agencies, that that we had that down, and the things that our overall infrastructure and overall SOC would take care of, was communicated to the individual agencies. For people that don't realize this, DOT is 60% of the employees and primarily resources of the DOT is the FAA. And the FAA is a big target for malicious mischief, and also for actual focused attacks. And so we have to make sure for the smaller agencies that the things that are happening to the FAA are properly communicated and properly prepared for across the agency, to make sure that a smaller agency is not a pathway to get to the FAA. So, or the federal highways, that's another.
Oh yeah, can you imagine? Can you imagine if we had ransomware? I don't even want to say it. I don't want to jinx it.
Well, a big concern in terms of ransomware this year has been federal transportation and it's been railways, and pipelines, because that's been a place where there's not perhaps as much mature solutions for monitoring the Internet of Things and industrial controls. So it's interesting, because like transportation, as opposed to having we tend to work with a lot of smaller government agencies, and we tend to work with a lot of industrial providers, pipeline companies. For maritime, we work with port authorities and shipping managers. And a lot of our job ends up being educating them on good practice, good recovery, in terms of these kind of situations and keeping them aware and educated.
And one of the largest ransomware attacks was on one of those on the shipping provider.
Yes.
Basically, if you want to mention anything about that.
Well, I was going to say Maersk, who's one of the largest shipping companies, industrial leader, and they have had, and I don't have all the details about it, but they very recently had a ransomware where they were basically taking, and I was thinking it was in terms of how they were doing lading, that someone had basically taken over their systems on how they were loading ships. And that's a very critical thing in terms of you want a ship to continue to sail.
Yeah.
And we also have had reports of attempted ransomware in the cruise lines, in terms of, especially as they're trying to come up to speed with opening back up after COVID. There's been some threats of people attempting to corrupt their verification systems that people have been tested, because they have to track and report that.
Great, thank you, Shelley. And Jamie, your component inside of DOJ, you deal with external constituents. There's a lot to war game. How are you guys handling disaster recovery, wargaming?
Yeah, so I know for 2019, our war game was actually pandemic focused. So that was very fortuitous. And we looked at that in terms of how we would, for business continuity purposes. So that was just like a little bit a different focus in our disaster recovery component of that. But then certainly since then, we tried to kind of go by the news and things like that. We were very much ransomware focused. And we wanted to, play out that scenario for everywhere that we needed to plan for disaster recovery. So we take a very strategic approach in terms of how we prioritize. Being distributed in the cloud is a good thing, except for there's a lot more communication and coordination that has to happen in working with your various vendors. And specifically for Just Grants, we are working under the assumption that hopefully not everything would go down at the exact same time. But in terms of working with vendors that might be more susceptible to ransomware attacks or other types of disasters, and how, what the business process flows are in terms of, making sure that the business can continue. And if there was one aspect or component of the larger system that went down, what would that look like? And what would it mean in terms of us being able to serve our constituency? For example, if our identity and access management system went down, how would that impact our users? I think that in having our system kind of distributed across different cloud vendors, it does give us the ability to make sure that we're communicating and posting messages on static web pages, and making sure that that our users, our external stakeholders specifically, would be aware of what the impact is to them, and how we're working, keeping them posted on how we're working on getting things back up and running. And in terms of other aspects of the system being down, if the system itself was down and you're able to log in, seeing a dashboard that's giving you more information, giving those individuals and external users phone numbers to call if they need immediate assistance, and so on and so forth, I think is really helpful. So there's a lot of coordination and communication, and like Brian said, it's people, it's process, it's technology, and there is a very big people and process component to disaster recovery. And being in the cloud doesn't save you from that, because there are still people involved. So in terms of that, there's a lot of different wargaming going on, especially since being so heavily distributed in leveraging not only infrastructure that's in the cloud, but services that are in the cloud. You know, these systems are all over the country, really. And so, you know, they might be prone to different disasters, but certainly everybody is prone, you know, and susceptible to a ransomware attack. And being able to recover from that, it is a really important focus for agencies and corporate America alike right now, just given, you know, the times that we're in and the threats that are out there.
No, thank you for that. And Brian, you want to add anything else to that topic? And I don't know what you see in commonalities, good practices across agencies, and even from the commercial world, if you have exposure to that.
So yeah, I certainly have exposure to all sides of the business, and you know, it's not just Maersk, right? Like Maersk had to pay $300 million to reinstall 4,000 servers and 45,000 PCs to recover from a NotPetya attack. But the FBI reports that recent ransom demands have been as high as 25 million. In a flash report that they put out in May, I find it really interesting that the alert includes recommended mitigations, and the very first one listed is regularly back up your data. So in terms of best practices, and Tom, you mentioned it's almost scary to think of. We don't like to think of it. Thankfully, there are people who have imagined these things and have thought through these things. And I think probably the best way to start looking at things is through the lens of the NIST cybersecurity framework. You know, really understanding what your organization is doing from the perspectives of identifying threats, protecting against threats, being able to detect them, respond to them, and automating those responses as much as possible. And then really having great after action reviews in the recovery phase. The average cost of recovery from a ransomware attack is $1.2 million and can take 16.1 days. And that doesn't incorporate anything like what you had to pay, you know, a hacker or loss of revenue due to your systems being down. That's just the dollar cost of restoration. So the more that you can not only, you know, protect against ransomware, but be able to restore very quickly, will obviously bring those numbers down. And one tool I'll mention that I have seen relatively new that I really like is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure CISA agency has released a new module in its cybersecurity evaluation tool called the Ransomware Readiness Assessment Tool, or RRA. CSET is a desktop software tool that helps people who focus on network defense through a step-by-step process to evaluate the cybersecurity practices on their networks. But the RRA within that is a self-assessment based on a tiered set of practices to help organizations better assess how well they're situated to defend and recover from a ransomware incident. So it helps organizations, you know, of all levels, you know, working with data classification levels of all tiers, understand their cybersecurity posture with respect to ransomware against the recognized standards and best practice recommendations in a really systematic and disciplined way. That is a really nice tool that I've helped customers work through and talk about future you know, disaster planning, particularly obviously against ransomware.
Yeah, that's great advice. And if my team can dig that up, then we'll send that out as part of this. Let's go to the polls again. I don't want to get in the wrong side of the CP credit people, but we actually have some good questions here. So I want to, so what is your agency's frequency of testing your critical systems? Every 0 to 6 months, every 6 months, every year, 1 year to 1.5 years? And do we have that right? What are the of your non-critical systems? So we've broken it out. The first question is, of course, your critical systems and your non-critical systems. We have some different criteria there. Okay, can everybody submit? And let's see what the results are. Interesting. Okay. So yeah, I think there's some work to be done on this guy here. You know what I mean, you know, maybe Shelley, what I mean, what you know, what is probably a good idea to do your non-critical systems and your critical systems? Where's your agency's head at on that?
Well, our agency for non-critical is that 1 year to 18 months. We try to make it a year, but you know, it kind of gets delayed sometimes because of we want to try and do it, even the non-critical things. We want to try and do it when we have what I would consider to be a normal load on the system and nothing really critical going on. So you don't do it and you know, when you have end of the year financials going out. But yeah, we try and as much as possible to do it as like a consolidation of doing all the non-critical systems at the same time. And you know, we've pretty much stuck to that in terms of, and we normally do a complete rollover of all of our systems to DR and and then recover them back. We usually roll them over for 10 days ish, like one weekend to the next weekend, so 7 to 10 days, and you know, kind of track every day any kind of issues that we have, and then we have some time in there to do our after action. Our critical systems, we tend to do a tabletop every 6 months, and then a recovery test within a year. And you know, I'd say that the goal is a year to do a functional test, and that may be based around a scenario. We may also, if integrate that recovery into, if we do have some kind of natural disaster that we have to recover from for that specific critical system. But we aim to do that functional test at least once a year. But in between, we like to do a tabletop where we make sure that, you know, the processes are still up to date, that communications is up to date, and like you say, the people in the process are still working the way that they're supposed to, and it gives us a chance to fine tune it before we actually do a functional test.
Great. How about Department of Justice, Jamie?
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, I can't speak for the entire Department of Justice, but I know that at OJP, for our non-critical systems, it's really a tabletop exercise that could be anywhere between, like, you know, 2 or even more years. And I'm just being honest. I know for, you know, we do, one of the things that we do, though, to kind of compensate for that a little bit, is we do take any real life events that may, you know, result in something going down or needing to be recovered, and treat that as a functional exercise. And in terms of the people in the process, a lot of times it is the same people being involved. We're a small agency, so I think that, you know, there's a lot to compensate for there in terms of it a lot of times including and involving the same IT personnel, so they really know what to do in those events. And again, for non-critical systems, if they can stand a little bit of downtime, and a lot of those are more internal types of systems, and, you know, our more critical, mission critical applications are ones that do serve the public. And those are the ones that we really focus our energy and our time on. So we tend to do functional and more tabletop exercises against those. So just being honest, the non-critical ones really don't get a ton of time and attention.
Well, I think I'm figuring this out, that you both represent agencies that are the leaders in this. I think we have a lot of work left to do in the federal government.
It's a the conditions change, the risks change, the vulnerabilities change. I have perhaps the benefit of having a agency that I believe, if you checked with OMB, is one of the oldest in terms of our personnel. so we have a lot of people that have been here for a long time, which does mean that, but they do tend to be more progressive minded. So that's kind of nice. But there's a lot of people that know what is mission critical, and they are willing to do what's appropriate in terms of updating process, and a lot of former military, a lot of former Navy and Coast Guard people. And so, you know, we have the benefit of that, but you know, it changes from year to year. And also the fact for us that we're going to continue to be moving more and more to the cloud. You know, basically we're at the point now where, except for internally developed applications, pretty much everything else is cloud-based. And so, you know, as those things are either replaced or updated so that they become cloud applications, especially our publicly facing stuff, our way of doing recovery is probably going to change immensely.
Yeah, I think I just remember back in my career, and I remember Casey Coleman saying this would be the thing to keep her up at night. You know, this is the thing where this disaster recovery, this is how you know, it's a nightmare. And I think we have a lot of opportunity with cloud to make it a lot easier than it maybe had been historically, but it seems to me we still need to prep better. You know, we still needed, there's not a, you know, help you understand your systems more. So it seems like we got some work here. I'm glad we did this panel. It definitely shed some light. Brian, I think we're almost done. I'm going to put all the pressure on you to close this program, and you know, some memorable takeaway, some quotable takeaway that we can take from this. But this has been one of the, I do a lot of these, and I've done a lot of these. I've learned a lot on this one. Thank you so much for all the panel. Go ahead, Brian.
It's been awesome being here.
Yep.
Yeah. You know, we talked about a lot of tools, a lot of frameworks, a lot of great use cases. But you know, I think it comes down to some very good, like, non-technical things. And one of the most important things I neglected to touch on is really understanding how you can reduce the blast radius. And what I mean by that is, don't let the failure of one system cascade into a failure of multiple systems, whether that's in a, you know, a benign disaster, storm, flood, power outage, tripped over a power cord, hard drive failed, or something much more malicious. Understanding where your most sensitive data is, keeping network segmentation at the forefront of your mind, and just practice that incident response plan. Practice you know, understanding what you will do in the event of a disaster, no matter what kind it is, and then you won't be scrambling to try to figure out what you're going to do in the event that something happens. As with most things in life, Grandma's advice was spot on when she said, you know, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and Grandma continues to be right to this day. So Grandma's always spot on. She always knows.
She always does. She always did. Great stuff. Great panel. Thank you, Shelley, Jamie, and Brian. And thanks, Amazon, for helping us out with this. This is a very pertinent topic. And thank you all for hanging in there. This has been fascinating, and enjoy your lunch. We're in the PM. We start in the AM and we're in the PM. And our next event, there's always a next event, right? Next, we have strategies for leveraging data in a multi-cloud environment. We're sticking on the cloud, you know, sticking on the cloud theme. So we got a great panel going there, and that is on July 15th from 1:30 to 2:30 p.m. And we'll see you all there, presumably. Thank you very much. Good afternoon.